Hi guys, so this is the last video for a chapter in our textbook. And so I came back to where it all began in my home office, AKA my room. A little update from South Carolina. We finally have gone into stay-at-home orders. We are one of the last states to do so, but we are there now, which I think is really good news. My husband went out to pick up a pizza from our favorite pizza place the other night, and there was like a huge crowd of people all gathered around this little ice cream station in our hometown. Like, that's not helping. So we are now stay-at-home orders too, even though a lot of us were doing that pretty much anyway, except to go out and get essentials and food. So I hope that you guys are doing well in whatever state that you're in. I guess whatever state you're in your state. And I just encourage you to, keep up your spirits and keep washing your hands and stay home. But with that said, make sure that you're getting into your yard or getting outside or opening a window or something during the day so that you can get some fresh air and see the sun and all that good stuff. Anyway, okay, enough lecturing from me on that. All right, so today our final topic, let me go ahead and share the screen. And it is global media in the digital age. Okay, and because I'm going a little stir crazy, I kept up with my little subtitles, and this one is "We're way beyond carrier pigeons, y'all." Interestingly, Reuters, who founded their Reuters news service, used carrier pigeons to deliver the news back in the day. Good old carrier pigeons. Sometimes I feel like there must be something kind of lovely about that. Here comes the mail. It's like an owl in Harry Potter. Of course, there's also, risks involved with live animals delivering your mail, but there is something nice about it. All right. Oh, goodness, my face is always in the way. There's a quote. Okay, so theories of international mass communication. All right, so there are 4 that you need to be familiar with to pursue studies in communications, and especially if you're interested in international communication, which is an awesome field to be in right now. So the first is authoritarian theory, and this is the theory that the government has complete control over media, and they use the media to inform the public and shape public opinion in their favor. So North Korea is an example here. I had to explain to my 13-year-old daughter the other day what the deal is with North Korea, and I found that I explained it very poorly, but the summary is that that North Korea is it controls all the media, and what they put out is very much propaganda, and there is no media that's not controlled by the government, so they're authoritarian. The second is libertarian theory, and this supports the individual's right to publish whatever they want, even material that's critical of the government. So that's a more democratic form of mass communication. Third is the social responsibility theory, which is a theory that the media should be free from most governmental constraints to provide the most reliable and impartial information. And so also a very democratic way of looking at it, and and also allowing that kind of free flow of information. And then finally, the Soviet theory, which is the theory that the media should be publicly owned and used to further the needs of the working class. So that has a lot to do with addressing class differentiation and exposing the sort of class structure that oppresses, and that the media, that should be the whole purpose of the media, is to further the needs of the working class. So the media doesn't work for the richest and the people who own all the companies. The media really works for the benefit of the working class. All right. Political and socioeconomic issues. All right. Media in developing countries. So we've talked about the digital divide a little bit too, but also there's a movement to move some of our media and data overseas. Critics rightly compare this to moving industry overseas because it's cheap labor. It doesn't, that kind of pollution doesn't hurt our atmosphere. It hurts someone else in a different part of the world. And they save money because of the employee benefits cost is not there. And so companies are now doing this with data and with media. For example, in Ghana's data processing center, they actually process and input a lot of low-level information for New York City. So traffic violations, parking violations, all of those are actually outsourced and then input in Ghana, which is fascinating. Now, you know, that's like any discussion about moving industry or business overseas, that has its critics, as we've already discussed, you know, in terms of labor laws as well. There are longer hours there. People, they can get the work done for cheaper. But there's also a movement in developing countries to embrace more media and to embrace more technology and change. So some of the factors that inhibit the growth there are government regulations, but also the lack of infrastructure that's really needed to have this kind of technology. There's an organization called Reporters Without Borders, and they're sort of like a watchdog group for journalism across the world. And in 2017, they put out a report in the World Press Freedom Index. And just to put some things into perspective here, China was ranked number 176 out of 180 countries in terms of the freedom of press. The United States was 40, okay? I think that a lot of people would think that we'd be number 1, or at least in the top 10. But we were number 40, and ahead of us were countries like Scandinavian countries, for example, are ahead of us. But you can look that up. There's a map in your book that shows the countries that were ahead of us as well. And then the digital divide as well, which we've talked about. But make sure that when you're talking about and thinking about the digital divide, you're not just thinking about access to the internet, but access to high quality information. It's not enough to be able to get on the internet. I just said that really strangely, the internet. It's not enough to be able to access the internet. You also have to be able to access quality information, and that doesn't happen all over the world. All right, another issue with mass communication in a global society are local values. So the first is paywalls, right? So there's a lot of quality information on the internet, but if there are paywalls, then that limits access from people in developing nations or lower income folks who really would like to see that information. Diversity as well. Certainly, a global media promotes diversity by allowing different faces and different experiences and different cultures to be seen. However, you know, the question there is there actually diversity on the internet though? I mean, how many, or even on television media and in films, how much diversity do we really see? Cultural imperialism, when a foreign country dominates a domestic media market through an influx of its products. And there's a lot of discussion about the United States really taking part in cultural imperialism because we outsource so much of our media. Shows like Grey's Anatomy are played all over the world. And so through that, our culture is getting broadcast across the world. And will that ultimately, you know, harm other cultures? It goes back to that article we read on the very first day about the culture of thin bites Fiji. What is the lasting impact of the country or the culture that can get most of its media spread in the world? Media hegemony, which is the idea that dominant groups control the media. And this usually goes with ownership. So the idea that the wealthy control the media. In the United States, the idea of media hegemony is that it caters to the interests of the capitalist ruling elite and the status quo. So in the United States, for example, almost all of our media is owned by just a handful of corporations. And so if that's the case, then you know, what effect does that have on the types of media and the types of shows and access? Homogeneity is an issue, of course, that you know, with international or global media, are we eventually just going to even everything out and become the sort of one global culture? Can digital technology disempower companies? Now, this is an interesting one, and it's something that people are really writing and researching now, right? With digital technology, with the idea of the citizen journalist or the fact that anyone can produce media, is that going to eventually disempower these larger companies that tend to own everything? Through digital technology, can the power of media return to the people? So a question to just keep an eye on. Co-production is very intriguing. So this is the concept that, for example, with a movie, it might be co-produced by two countries. If you watch the credits of a lot of films, you'll see a whole running list of, I don't know, the United States folks who are working on the film, and then it'll all of a sudden go over to like in Canada, and it will have a whole nother list. An example of this would be Iron Man 3, which was co-produced with China. And there were scenes particularly shot to be spliced in for showings in China. Flow, so information flow. Western news agencies traditionally have produced 80% of the news distributed globally. So this is important because that's where we're getting our news. That's where everyone's getting their news. It's from the West. Local voices. So how do we ensure that local voices are heard in media? We certainly still have local newspapers, local television newscasts, for example. There's not a lot of local programming. PBS certainly has some, at least here in South Carolina, we have lots of South Carolina shows that come on PBS. I don't know how widely they're watched though, especially by younger generations. So how do we keep local voices in the media when the world is becoming more global in terms of its media consumption? How do the people of Liechtenstein keep their local voices in the media when a lot of their media may be coming from the United States or the United Kingdom? And then global voices. So what are, where are the places where there are true global voices in media? Not CNN focusing mostly on, with an emphasis on American news. Certainly they hit other global issues, but is there actually a global voice, and where could that be? Interestingly, in recent years, an organization called Al Jazeera, which was a Middle Eastern media company, has become this sort of global voice. If you travel to Europe, many of the countries you go to will have an Al Jazeera channel because they deal with a lot of global news over just local voice. Okay, a few other things. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has become a major issue, and you should and could and should Google the issues that Zoom is having right now, actually, in terms of security. Certainly at Furman, we've had an issue where people have Zoom bombed in, and they're saying racist, anti-Semitic, sexist, really offensive things. And a lot of colleges and schools have had this happen because of the use of Zoom. Also, in terms of regulations, FERPA, protection and privacy, Zoom is having some issues with that too, now that it's so big. So you should look into that. It's a really interesting moment for that in terms of cybersecurity and privacy. Russia is an important country to watch when we talk about cybersecurity. One of my friends at Furman who works in IT has in his office a screen, and it has a constant feed. It has a map of the world with a constant feed of cyber attacks shooting across like different colored shooting stars. And it shows where they're coming from, and it shows where they're going to. And there are, at any time of day when I've been in his office, there are outrageous amounts coming into the United States, particularly into places like New York or Washington, D.C., but all over the United States. Interestingly, on that map, Russia is almost black. You don't really see much directly coming out. You don't really see much going in. There's a blocker there with these studies. So Russia has a very organized way of going about this. It's called the Internet Research Agency, which sounds so legit, but truly they put forth disinformation campaigns. And that is what they are for. And that is how they interfere with other nations, is by putting out these campaigns through social media, but all media, really. So that's going to be a developing story too, as we head toward the 2020 election, because we do know that there was attempts by Russia to infiltrate Facebook, for example, and post all kinds of things, and that were not true, that were disinformation that then got shared, and that's how it goes. So we'll be hearing more about Russia as we head to the 2020 election. This also means that you really need to yourself and to encourage everyone you know, including your family. I find that older adults are the worst at this. Encourage people to fact check what they read on the internet. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If it sounds too, red flag about the candidate you don't want, it is unlikely to be true, right? But either way, check the sources. Cyber terrorism was, of course, a new and constant threat, and that word is used many different ways, but certainly, the hacking in of major hacking into major hubs and disruptions, that's on the rise too. We're going to be seeing more research on cyber terrorism. We're sort of in the early stages of that. And then, of course, tensions with the media. After the election of President Trump, he began to use the phrase fake news whenever there was a news story that was not flattering about him. And he's labeled some companies, the fake news media. He has called the media the enemy of the people as well. So that kind of rhetoric is part of our language today. People use the phrase fake news. I hear it every day. But the question becomes, what does that kind of rhetoric do to the relationship between the media and the people, right? If we go back to yesterday, to the quote from Pulitzer about the role of the media in shaping the government and therefore, the country and the people. If we go back to Citizen Kane with the Declaration of Principles and, writing for the people, then what does this kind of rhetoric of fake news, what does that do for the trust of people in the media? We'll be hearing more about that as well as the 2020 election ramps up, I guarantee. And I want you to really look at that with a nonpartisan eye and with a critical eye into what's being called fake news. Is it really fake, or is it just unfortunate opinion? So really think about that and be watching the media with a critical eye. All right, so I think that's all the information I have to impart to you for the semester. The next thing the last thing that you'll need to do after you do the activity in the forum for this chapter would be your final research paper. So really excited to read that. Remember, your topic can be anything you choose that's related to media. Oh my gosh, the possibilities are huge. If you wanted to do a more extensive research on the film that you watched, you can do that. If you want to write about, oh my goodness, if I sat here and listed all the options, we'd be here for another hour, which you don't want. But so you can choose whatever topic you like. It can be analytical in nature, it can be, well, it should be analytical in nature, but it could deal with theory, it could deal with research, just a topic. It could be a television show or a podcast that you really love and about the cultural impact of it. I want to see what interests you. Please choose something that really interests you. And if you need ideas, just email me and let me know some things that you're interested in, and I'll throw out some ideas to you. But I really want you to enjoy doing this research paper. I know that sounds crazy, but choose something you're interested in that you want to spend time on, and then you'll enjoy it more. I'll help you at any point in the process. Thesis, introduction, you want me to look over a draft. If I made notes about how you need more analysis in your film paper, shoot me part of this paper and say, is this more what you're looking for? Whatever you need help with, we can do. We can conference on Zoom or through email, whatever works for you. So I guess that's it, you guys. And I'm sure I'll make another video before the end of this thing because I, miss you and stuff. But please take care of yourselves. Know that I'm thinking about you. I miss you guys. I could go through every single one of you and tell you something that I truly miss about having you in class. I'm at a loss. So take care and let me know what I can do to help you. Thinking of you. All right. Talk to you soon. See ya.